Hello everyone, my name is Lawton here with Verified Investing and welcome back to another Pro Charts. Today's video we're going to be talking a little bit about stocks, right? And we're going to be talking about some big caps, small caps, levels of support, resistance, and just go with it. But to start, we're going to talk about the S&P and the Qs. Let's go ahead and let me share my screen and let's hop right into it. So the S&P, at least for today, great move up. We can see that we're up over 2% from yesterday off of news that a ceasefire or a 2-week extension was given to Iran by Trump, right? When he threatened to literally kind of nuke or obliterate, right, Iran, right? So had a nice push up, opened up about 2.5% higher, but sold off, right? Sold off, did then recovered and is selling off again right now because the Strait was closed and Trump isn't happy. Right. So where are the levels of support and resistance on the S&P? The very first level that I really like is at this nice pivot high, just around 683. If it pushes up there, you should find some resistance. Next key level, let's say we continue to push up, make new all-time highs. Everybody's looking at that nice $700 level for resistance. For support, obviously, first off, gap fill from yesterday. Let's say bad news bears comes in, continues to push it down. The ceasefire doesn't last. Iran's still upset, and we end up threatening to obliterate them again. 660 is my level on the S&P. For the Qs, similar story. For resistance, I have this gap fill here around 616, 617. You have double top here around 636, and then a key psychological level just around 650. For the bottom side, to the downside, you have support down here around 589, gap fill. Another gap fill down here around 558. So these are some key levels that I'm going to be watching for support and resistance on the S&P, the Qs. But the question is, how does this kind of affect the overall rest of the market? And through the stocks that I'm going to be talking about now, you'll see that they generally kind of follow the trend of the S&P and the Qs just because it tracks that. But sometimes you'll see some decoupling, right? S&P, Qs, if it didn't sell off, right? If all you knew was that the S&P was up 2% today, the Qs were up 2.5% today, you'd be like, that's a great day in the markets. But not every single company shares that kind of sentiment, right, with it. So let's talk about one that does share the sentiment, some stocks that are moving in the same direction you're expecting, now that the S&P and the Qs are pushing up. So first off, Meta, right? Meta is green for the day, up 6% today. Great day. Was up over 9.5%, almost 10%, guys. Got almost 10, like basically 630. Absolutely incredible. But the question is, now that it's pulling back, what can I expect? Where do I think it's going? Well, for me, key level of support, obviously gap fill from yesterday. I'm going to say that for every single one of these. But actually, pivot low around 520 should provide some support there on Meta as well. And this is moving similarly to the Qs and the S&P, right? In that it opened up and it's still up. But it's different from the Qs and the S&P because while the Qs are getting towards their lows of the day and the S&P is selling off a bit from its opening price, Meta's still up from the open, right? Still up from the open. So key levels of resistance on Meta. First one, nice gap fill here around 638. Pivot high here around 620, 672. And then one more here around 739. Nice gap fill. Heading towards all-time highs up here at 796, right? So this is what I'm watching here on Meta. Same thing with kind of the semiconductor industry, Nvidia, right? This looks a little more similar to the S&P, to the Qs, right? Opening up higher and then selling off intraday. Right? That's exactly how Nvidia looks right now. So where are my levels of support for Nvidia? first level is going to be that gap fill just from yesterday. An additional gap fill down here on 165 resistance. It's a gap fill 195. We're watching this nice key 200 psychological level, has a nice pivot here as well for resistance on it. Right, so we can clearly see Nvidia moving with the S&P. So we have support from the gap fill, from two gap fills, resistance from a gap fill, and a pivot high, and key psychological level moving forward. So just like the Qs and the S&P, basically at the same places, that's giving us key levels of support and resistance. And then the last stock I'm going to talk about that has kind of decoupled itself, right, from the Qs. So we saw one that that's outperforming the markets. We saw one that is kind of copying the markets. And let's take a look at one that has decoupled from the markets. The opposite direction, guys. Absolutely opposite direction here on Tesla. Look at this sell, guys. And they're actually negative for the day. Tesla initially opening up almost 5% higher than yesterday's close off of this great news. But what has happened, guys? Tesla absolutely selling off from its intraday highs, sold off over 6.5% to go negative. Wow, that is crazy, guys. On Tesla, where are my levels of support and resistance? Well, your very, very near term is going to be double bottom from yesterday, 337. But we're trading at prices near this potential gap fill. We just filled that gap. We haven't seen these prices since September, right? Whereas for the rest of the markets, it's not quite the case. So 325. And Tesla's the stock that's been beaten down recently, talking about how they had poor deliveries in China and less interest, right? So just kind of a down move here in Tesla, but 325 should anticipate a bounce in Tesla there, right? Additional levels, I'll give you this one right here. Additional level 302, and then my ultimate favorite level. I'd be very surprised if it got there, but this nice Liberation Day lows around 214 should provide a significant amount of support on Tesla should it continue to push lower. Now, let's say Tesla instead has a change of heart and continues to push higher. The markets go higher. Where am I going to short Tesla? Maybe for a day trade, maybe for a swing trade. Well, I really like this gap fill up here, basically around 381.50-ish. If you can get there, a nice additional 1408 and then 416 pivot high. And then you have all this kind of price action and consolidation around the key $400 level. Nice psychological level there. Ultimately, if we want Tesla to continue to push higher, we have this nice downsloping trend line. We look for a break to the upside. That's what we're watching. Let's go back and do it with the rest of these charts. Meta today absolutely crushed this nice downsloping trend line. Nice push up, kind of retrace, and then pushing up, looking to close above. We want to see confirmation, and then look for that move higher. And the last one is Nvidia. Right, Nvidia, kind of a different pattern here, right? Because Nvidia has been the darling in the stock market, the king, right? The most valuable company. But if we took a look at this, the SMH, the ETF that tracks the semiconductor industry, right? In which Nvidia is the largest semiconductor, is actually near its all-time highs. Despite that, guys, Nvidia is still over 14% down from its all-time highs. And I anticipate a pullback in the SMH around here. So with that being said, right, that means if Nvidia doesn't push up, the SMH is saying we don't need Nvidia to make a new all-time high for us to continue to push higher. We'll look at TXN, we'll look at MU, these other kind of semiconductors. So in theory, a nice push up should help Nvidia, right? But it looks like that they're starting to decouple, right? And that the other semiconductors relative to the SMH and relative to Nvidia are actually outperforming and are stronger than Nvidia. Of course, Nvidia is still a force to be reckoned with, still the most expensive and most valuable company in the world, but just something to think about. But on Nvidia, right, watching, a couple of down sloping trend lines here, namely this one. If we can break this down sloping trend line, we're looking at a move higher to at least $200 plus. All right. With that being said, guys, I'm going to call it here. Thank you so much for watching this video. Again, my name is Lawton here with Verified Investing, and this was a Pro Charts on these stocks. Have a great day, guys, and I'll see you next time.